You're with India Today, and it's another significant ruling that's coming in now from the top court, the apex court. In fact, it's asked BCCI's Anurag Thakur and Shirke, they have been asked to demit office. That's the ruling that has come in from the Supreme Court. Also, all the state association members will also have to demit office if they do not implement. Justice Lodha is himself on the phone line with us. The Lodha committee recommendations that was being heard. Sir, thank you for joining India Today. Take us through, your first reaction. Do you, in terms of the court ruling that's now come in?
The order is logical because once BCCI refused to implement the order of 18 July, obviously this was to happen.
So, sir, this was to happen, but there was also that chance of Anurag Thakur. He had been asked that either you apologize. Given that kind of a situation, him asking to demit office. How does it play out? How does it augur for the BCCI?
No, I only see actually, look, once the order of the Supreme Court is there, everyone who is concerned to implement that has to do that. Once it has not been done, consequences were bound to follow. This is first step to ensure that the order passed by the Supreme Court on 18 July is implemented.
So, on 1st October, the board had actually accepted several of the Lodha committee, the recommendations that was made by your committee. But the more important ones, they were let out. So did it come across as BCCI was clearly trying to play the hard ball here?
Look, partial implementation is neither here nor there. It was a full package, and it had to be implemented fully to bring transparency, accountability, and objectivity in the affairs of the administration of BCCI.
Justice Lodha, I request you to be with us. We are joined by our consulting editor, Sports, Boria Mazumdar. Boria, you wanted to take a question from Justice Lodha.
Yeah, Justice Lodha, it's also being said that the senior-most vice president will now officiate along with the joint secretary. And the court is sort of practically taking the BCCI to shreds, sir. It's also said that court will nominate administrators and Gopal Subramaniam will suggest the names. And you have been entrusted with the task of enforcing the judgment. How do you react to this, sir? Because now the committee has been told by the Supreme Court that you have to enact the judgment. Your reactions to that?
Look, let us study the order. Once we are clear about it, we'll do whatever can be done by us.
Sir, it's being said that the committee role will be, after enforcement, will also be supervisory. Do you sort of envisage that this might be a long-run process for you now to be involved with cricket administration? Because clearly the entire BCCI top brass has been removed.
That we would like to avoid, but let us first have a look at the order. Then we will take a call how to go forward about it.
Sir, two questions. Do you think there was any middle path, or because the BCCI repeatedly did what they did and the President and Secretary repeatedly did what they did, the writing was on the wall?
Look, how could there have been any middle path, Boria? Once Supreme Court has accepted our reforms and passed the order 18 July, it is law of the land. It has to be implemented and enforced. As simple as this. The committee could not have changed it. Supreme Court, of course, could have, but it has chosen not to do that.
Are you disappointed at what the BCCI did over the last 6 months? Because this was a judicial order, or how do you look at it? Because clearly there was a mandate, but it was repeatedly flouted, and you have been personally attacked by the BCCI President.
Yeah, look, our experience was disgusting, but because once we thought that the order of the Supreme Court was there, it was bound to be obeyed, and it had to be followed. Actually, we had fixed timelines, we had given sufficient time having regard to the order, because order was to be implemented within 4 to 6 months, but that was not done. We were constrained to submit actually 3 reports before the Supreme Court, which again was unusual. But we did that only to ensure that the order of the Supreme Court is implemented.
Sir, do you think that Anurag Thakur might also have to resign as MP, given that the SC has issued a perjury notice?
No, sorry, that has nothing to do with that, sir. I don't think it has any connection with that.
And so will you stick with GK Pillai, because now Fali Nariman and Gopal Subramaniam have been entrusted in discussion with you to finalize the observers?
That was our suggestion. Now I am just hearing from you about the order of the Supreme Court. Let copy of the order before us. We'll study that and do whatever is required to be done. Thank you, Boria. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Endgame BCCI today in the Supreme Court. The apex court has come down hard on the Indian Cricket Board, and yes, the axe has fallen on the senior most BCCI officials, and Anurag Thakur, the BCCI President, along with Secretary Ajay Shirke, have been asked to demit office. Boria, coming to you. Major announcement by the Supreme Court. This also sends a strong message to all state associations, isn't it, to accept the reforms, or each of the association heads also will have to demit office.
With your permission, Shobit, let me just first tell our viewers what all the Supreme Court has said. All office bearers of state and BCCI who do not follow committee guidelines shall cease to be office bearers now. Anurag Thakur and Ajay Shirke shall cease and desist from being involved with the BCCI. Notice to Anurag Thakur for contempt and perjury. Court will nominate administrators and Fali Nariman and Gopal Subramaniam will suggest names. Senior most vice president of the board and joint secretary will be secretary in the interim. Committee tasked with enforcing the judgment. Existing office bearers will function subject to control of administrators and committee. And finally, committee role after
Bore, just hold on. Justice Lodha's reaction is coming in. Let's listen in quickly.
And right decision taken.
This is logical consequence, because once the committee's reforms were accepted by the Supreme Court in its order of 18 July 2016, it had to be implemented. There were obstructions, there were impediments. We fixed the timelines that was not adhered to. We submitted 3 reports before the Supreme Court. Even then it was not implemented. Obviously this was to happen, and this has happened.
The point is the way it has been dragged on for some time. BCCI was trying to take or trying to purchase some time. Now finally probably it's a case of overconfidence on the part of BCCI not to have taken the Supreme Court seriously.
I don't read whether they were overconfident or not, but one should understand that when the order of the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the land, has come, it has to be obeyed by all. It is law of the land. Nobody can escape it. The majesty of law has worked, and Supreme Court order, Supreme Court itself has ensured that its order of 18 July is now enforced.
Cases of perjury will be going on against Anurag Thakur. In a way, he can't escape the law of the land anymore.
I haven't read the order, so I can't comment on this question right now.
Were you expecting this?
As I told you, this was a logical consequence, because so long as order of the Supreme Court passed on 18 July stands, BCCI was bound to follow it. And being at the helm of affairs, if they were not able to implement the Supreme Court order, these consequences were bound to follow, and that is what has happened.
Justice Lodha, doesn't this throw the game of cricket into turmoil?
No, surely not. Actually, it's the victory for the game of the cricket, and it will flourish. Don't worry about that. Administrators come, administrators go, but ultimately it is for the benefit of the game, and game will flourish, I'm very sure.
Sir, is your role over now? Because the Supreme Court has also asked that an interim committee be set up.
Sorry, again, I haven't read the order, but surely if that's what we would like, that the committee's role is over. As a matter of fact, it was over. Once we submitted our report on 4th January 2016, it was only by 18 July that committee was revived as we were asked to implement the order. Accordingly, we fixed the timelines, but still we were unsuccessful. The order of the Supreme Court remained unimplemented, and it is for this reason I think this is the first step towards implementation of the order of 18 July 2016.
Justice Lodha, does this now set a precedent for even other associations, other national sports federations to get their act together, or the Supreme Court will put them in their place?
Look, I'm not aware of the rules which govern the other federations, but surely the report which we submitted and the order of the Supreme Court should work as a template for other sports organizations.
Does this now set a precedence for good governance as far as sports bodies are concerned in India?
I hope so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just-
Thank you.
just-
Thank you.
just 2 minutes
I was the
each.
one first to confirm. I was the first one to read, sir. You promised me.
Yes, it's the big BCCI cleanup. Justice Lodha says it's victory for cricket. Administrators can come and go, but the game of cricket will flourish. I'm joined by Anusha Soni, our correspondent from the Supreme Court as well. Anusha, first of all, let's talk about Anurag Thakur, the BCCI President. The axe has come down on him and a show cause notice has been issued by the Supreme Court asking him to explain why perjury charges should not be leveled against him. But before I come to you, Anusha, Bishan Singh Bedi is speaking. Let's listen it.
ऐसी जो क्रिया हुई है भारतीय स्पोर्ट में, भारतीय क्रिकेट में, हम सबको इसको वेलकम करना चाहिए। सिर्फ 2-4 क्रिकेट के खिलाड़ी नहीं, जो क्रिकेट फॉलोइंग पब्लिक है, उनको भी अंदाज़ा हो जाना चाहिए कि किस अंधेरे में बैठे थे। आज अगर रोशनी दिखाई पड़ रही है तो उस रोशनी के लिए हम अपना आभार प्रकट करना चाहते हैं सुप्रीम कोर्ट के और जस्टिस ठाकुर को स्पेशली हम शुक्राना कहना चाहते हैं।
Sir, you are a very eminent former cricketer yourself. You are welcoming the judgment. There are some voices, including those in the BCCI now removed by the Supreme Court, who were not so welcoming of the Supreme Court intervention. What do you have to say about that, sir?
Well, this is I don't have to get into any kind of debate. Is there any room for debate? To be honest, no. This is full and final.
So this is going to be good news for cricket.
This is going to be great news for Indian sport and cricket in particular. Though you've been watching what's happening in IOA, right? That is another case of absolute shambles. That will be clarified too now.
Sir, एक बार थोड़ा सा live पे please.
Yeah, well,
Sir, ये
thank you. Sorry.
We've been joined by Bishan Bedi. He was present in the court.
Bishan Singh Bedi welcoming the landmark verdict of the Supreme Court where the axe has fallen on the BCCI top brass, including President Anurag Thakur and Secretary Ajay Shirke. Anusha is on the phone line with us. Anusha, could you just elaborate what was Supreme Court's observations, especially on the BCCI boss Anurag Thakur?
Well, clearly, if you remember the last hearing, the Supreme Court bench headed by Justice T.S. Thakur had made it amply clear that the conflicting affidavits before the Supreme Court were a matter of concern and cannot be taken lightly. Now, coming on those observations and the sort of warnings the court had given, they have questioned Anurag Thakur as to why he should not be tried for perjury, why he should not be, issued a notice for contempt of court. He has to come forward and explain that in an affidavit. He has to come forward and satisfy to the court. In effect, now Thakur and Shirke both cannot, be involved in the operations of the BCCI in any manner or form. That is amply clear. Now, we must remember that this was, a demand from the Lodha panel for a very long time. Lodha panel about 2 months ago had moved the Supreme Court and said that the top brass should have to be fired. But a long rope was extended by the Supreme Court. But today, as Justice Thakur, T.S. Thakur, the Chief Justice, retires tomorrow, this is one of the big orders that was much anticipated from a bench led by him.
Absolutely, Anusha. Thanks for that update. We'll come back to you. But we've got veteran journalist Pradeep Magazine here in the studio along with former cricketer Nikhil Chopra. Pradeep, first of all, what does this mean for Anurag Thakur? Is it the end of the road for Thakur as a cricket administrator?
It obviously is. You see, it's a Supreme Court order which he and the board were defined. They were not willing to follow the law of the land, as Justice Lodha said, that once an order is passed, it becomes the law of the land. And that's the kind of defiance which has not just cost him the presidentship of the board, but now he is facing contempt and perjury charges as well. So what the board has done, what its administrators have done, they have not only embarrassed themselves, but they have embarrassed the cricketing fraternity, the cricketing administration.
Boria, what does this mean for... Okay, we've got Manish Tiwari on the phone line as well. Manish, how do you read this landmark judgment on Anurag Thakur? Is it the end of the line for Thakur as an administrator? And do you support this move by the Supreme Court as they have tried to clean up cricket and shown the door to all administrators who have been resisting these cricket reforms?
Well, as someone who had appeared for Mr. Bishan Singh Bedi and Kirti Azad and the other test cricketers in the Lodha committee matter in the Supreme Court, I guess this was inevitable. After the 18th July judgment had come, BCCI's attempt to try and not implement that judgment was only leading them towards the path of contempt. So therefore, Anurag Thakur's removal and the removal of the BCCI secretary was something which was inevitable. They should have seen the writing on the wall. After all, there is a majesty of the law in this country. There is something called the rule of the law. And neither the BCCI administrators nor the BCCI board is above the law. So therefore, this is a welcome step. And we also do believe that the Lodha committee recommendations should be implemented across the board in all other sports disciplines also. I believe a petition has already been filed in the Supreme Court to that effect to try and persuade the Apex Court to see that the Lodha committee recommendations are applied to all other sports federations, including the Indian Olympic Association, where you saw a very unsavory episode play itself out recently.
Absolutely. One question on Anurag Thakur. Do you think this judgment will put any question marks on his position as a member of parliament?
Those are two things which are mutually exclusive. You see, he's elected by the people. He can only be, removed by the Lok Sabha, and that also has happened only once when the Lok Sabha was seized of the cash for questions issue. So therefore, insofar as his position as the BCCI President is concerned and his position as a member of Parliament is concerned, both of them are mutually exclusive. So I do not see anything that that getting impacted in any manner. And it's sad because Anurag is a friend. Anurag is someone who I personally have a lot of respect for, and I'm personally pained that things really came to this pass.
Manish, just stay with us. Pradeep Magazine has a question for you. Pradeep, go ahead.
Manish, just a question. A parliament member facing charges of contempt and perjury. I can understand as a board president he has been removed, that's a separate issue, but facing charges of contempt and perjury, won't it affect the credibility of a parliament member?
I don't think so. There have been instances in the past where people who were convicted by a trial court have then been acquitted by higher courts, and they've continued to be members of parliament. So therefore, this is mutually exclusive. And if anybody tries to extend the Supreme Court judgment to Anurag Thakur's position as a member of parliament, I think that would be a bit of a stretch. As I was saying, Anurag has been a very close friend. We've worked together in parliament, and I'm very sad that things came to such a pass. The BCCI should have taken a far more maturer position after the 18th of July Supreme Court judgment.
One final question, Manish, it's not just about Anurag Thakur, it's about state associations as well, who have all unitedly defied the Supreme Court order for 6 months. We saw Mr. Sharad Pawar quitting his post a few days back as he did not fulfill the norms laid down by the Supreme Court order. Do you see now other state association heads who belong to various political parties and affiliations, they too should now vacate their posts or just simply accept the Supreme Court order and implement it?
Well, absolutely. The Lodha committee recommendations have almost been accepted in toto. This was an argument which was made by their councils that the right to association, which is guaranteed by Article 19, does not allow the court to interfere into the constitution of state associations which are registered as separate entities. But that argument was struck down by the Supreme Court. So therefore, the reform was supposed to be deep and all-pervasive, BCCI and all the state associations. So therefore, cricket as a whole, or the administration of cricket as a whole, has to accept the 18th July recommendations and implement it in toto. And so therefore, anyone who stands in the way, and especially those people who are above 70, who the Supreme Court says should not be holding positions, politicians and bureaucrats should not be holding positions in cricket, and I do hope it extends to other sports bodies. So all of them will have to go.
Well, thank you, Manish, for joining us. We also have on the phone line Supreme Court lawyer and sports activist Rahul Mehra. Rahul, landmark judgment by the Supreme Court. Does it send the right message across to the cricket-loving people of India?
Oh yes, it's poetic justice for every cricket citizen, and I think we should be proud of once again the Honourable Supreme Court for delivering justice and ensuring that its judgment, which was passed almost 6 months back on July 18, 2016, is now going to be implemented because the two biggest obstacles have been removed. I would now expect that, what I've been fighting for almost 20 years, I filed this PIL against BCCI in 1999, asking for exactly the same thing, that BCCI is a public body since it performs public function, though a private body in that sense, technically. And Supreme Court in 2012 and 14 has held it to be so. And in 2016, the landmark judgment came in. So though it's been a 20-year battle of sorts, but I'm so glad that, what I started in 1999 single-handedly, the entire country has joined hands, more and more power has got into it. And, one would expect that Mr. Anurag Thakur and others who tried to, obstruct the administration of justice and have purged in that sense in the Supreme Court by filing false affidavit, it is taken to its logical conclusion by prosecutions being launched against them on account of perjury, and law to take its own course against these individuals. Another issue which must happen is immediately the Honourable Supreme Court, I'm sure, will now appoint administrators, and those administrators must not be like the ones that we've had earlier by the likes of Gavaskar and others, because they are his master's voice, the BCCI's voice. They are employed by BCCI. They earn tons and tons of crores annually, but through BCCI. So therefore, are thoroughly compromised individuals. Therefore, we need somebody who can go beyond his own personal interest, will not be influenced by anybody.
Absolutely.
And those are the individuals who have to then kick in the reforms which have been mandated by the Supreme Court, so that the Indian cricket can again have a sigh of relief, and it can be the gentleman's game that we all have been so proud of.
Absolutely. Rahul, just stay with us. Nikhil sends the right message across to various state associations as well. If the BCCI President and the Secretary can be shown the door, then not just 4 associations which have accepted reforms so far, do we expect in the coming days more and more associations to now change their constitutions and adopt these reforms?
We don't expect. They're going to be doing it. There's no two ways about it. And I think, if the parent body is going to be accepting, or they are going to be accepting the Lodha recommendations, it's got to be across all board. Interesting point that Boria was asking, if he's still there, I wanted to ask him. He was saying that the senior most vice president and the senior most or the other joint secretary will be running the BCCI. But what if they've served term for 9 years also? What happens to them, Shobhit? That's going to be interesting, because according to the Lodha recommendations, somebody served their term in 9 years in the BCCI. If he's a senior vice president, obviously he has to go as well. Then who's going to be actually running the BCCI at this moment in time?
Yes, Boria, could you just elaborate 70-year age cap if anyone is above that, or a combined period of 9 years as a cricket administrator? We believe today's judgment also says that they also will have to vacate their office, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, all of them are gone. In fact, I was about to say that when we got somebody on the phone line, that whoever qualifies, that judgment is very clear that the joint secretary or the senior most vice president will officiate as secretary and president, provided they are still eligible. So they will now go down that route and see if the cumulative 9 years cap has been, exhausted by the joint senior most vice president or not. And that's how it will be done. But this is a massive, massive moment.
Massive judgment.
Because this is now going to be applicable on state associations.
Absolutely.
So
massive judgment. Boria, I'll have to just interrupt you there. We'll come back to you and our guests who are right here in the studio.
2 historic rulings that have come in today from the Apex Court just ahead of retirement of the Chief Justice of India. A big setback for the BCCI. Let's go over to Shobhit Mittal, my colleague, who will take you through all the developments related to the BCCI. Shobhit, looks like several vacancies coming up there in that big cricketing board.
Absolutely, and starting right from the BCCI President Anurag Thakur and Secretary Ajay Shirke, both of whom have been asked to demit office, and any official, whether from the BCCI or state associations, who does not fulfill the criteria laid down by the Supreme Court, which includes 70-year age cap and a cooling off period, will not be eligible to hold BCCI office anymore. Landmark judgment by the Supreme Court cleaning the BCCI house, and which clearly affects the BCCI top brass. Reactions coming in. Let's first listen in from Justice Lodha.
Decision taken.
This is logical consequence, because once the committee's reforms were accepted by the Supreme Court, in its order of 18 July 2016, it had to be implemented. There were obstructions, there were impediments. We fixed the timelines that was not adhered to. We submitted 3 reports before the Supreme Court. Even then it was not implemented. Obviously this was to happen and this has happened. No, surely not. Actually, it's the victory for the game of the cricket and it will flourish. Don't worry about that. Administrators come, administrators go. But ultimately it is for the benefit of the game and game will flourish, I'm very sure.
This is going to be great news for Indian sport and cricket in particular. You've been watching what's happening in IOA, right? That is another case of absolute shambles. That will be clarified too now.
All right, we are now joined by Justice Mukul Mudgal on the phone line. Sir, historic judgment. Did you expect this, that BCCI President and Secretary will be shown the door? After all, it's been 6 months since the Supreme Court has passed its order and the BCCI has so far been defined.
Look, obviously this is bound to happen because something which is not clearly understood is that the Lodha Committee reforms were no longer the Lodha Committee recommendations, but they had become the judgment of the Supreme Court by its approval of the reforms. And nobody in this country can say that I'll defy the Supreme Court order. So it was no longer Lodha reforms which were in the picture. It was the judgment of the Supreme Court which was in the picture. And so that is why this has happened.
Justice Mudgal, just one more comment on BCCI President Anurag Thakur. He's been issued a show cause notice and Supreme Court has asked him why perjury charges should not be initiated against him. What's your opinion on Anurag Thakur? What will be his future as a cricket administrator?
This is a sub judice matter. I would like to comment about it as a former judge. Okay.
Will other state associations, do you expect to fall in line soon now?
Not expect, they are bound to. They have no choice in this matter anymore. All right. And only thing is, it is possible that now that the principles have been finally accepted by the Supreme Court, Lodha Committee reforms, they are now general principles like age, tenure and all that. And they may, if other bodies approach the Honorable Supreme Court, then they may be binding on other sports bodies also once the court rules. The principles are there now. Unless, of course, the Parliament steps in and enacts the Sports Bill, which was into an act. But that is for the Parliament to decide. Parliament is the government. I can't say anything about it.
All right, Justice Mudgal, thank you for joining us. Pradeep, but a landmark judgment, this was expected, isn't it? 6 months, the BCCI defied the Supreme Court order, and I don't know what Anurag Thakur and Secretary Shirke's plan was, but this was coming, isn't it?
Look, what has happened in a way is sad that the board didn't see these things coming, or if they saw it, I'm sure they saw it, but because of the age cap and the 9-year cap tenure, most of this, in fact, all the top brass of the BCCI as of today's order ceases to be administrator in the board, because I personally don't think even the senior most vice president or joint secretary qualify, because they all must have exhausted their 9-year cap. It is embarrassing, as I said earlier, for the board, but it's a great news for everyone, because now what is going to happen, there is going to be a clamor for the same kind of recommendations to be implemented by other sports bodies. As you know, there is already a PIL in the court which saying that why shouldn't the Lodha Commission recommendations also be followed by other sports bodies. So it's a good sign that a cleanup operation which started from cricket is going to go towards all other sports bodies.
Boria, January 19th now is the crucial date, isn't it, where an interim committee will be decided to head the BCCI and take the Indian cricket into the next era?
Yeah, absolutely. And the most important question as far as I'm concerned now is, as Pradeep said, and as we have been saying on India Today, if I'm right, 31 people are disqualified. So who's going to be the next president? Who's going to be the secretary? Because the vice president, senior most vice president doesn't qualify. Amitabh Chaudhary doesn't qualify. Obviously Anirudh Chaudhary doesn't qualify. Anurag's gone. Ajay is gone. And if you just look down, Niranjan Shah's gone, Sharad Pawar's gone, Mohinder Pandav's gone, N. Srinivasan's gone. One by one, if you just take a look, practically the entire state association top brass is also gone. So how many people do qualify? That's the first and most important question. Obviously, the BCCI employees, whether it's a Rahul Johri and MV Sridhar, all of these people who are there as professionals will run the board along with the administrators.
Right.
But once the elections are done, who becomes the BCCI boss based on the Lodha recommendations is something we've got to wait and see.
Boria, let me put that question across. Let me put that question across through former BCCI Treasurer Kishore Rungta, who's on the phone line with us. Kishore, do you think this is an embarrassment for the BCCI? The judgment that has come out, the entire top brass has been shown the door?
It's a huge embarrassment for the BCCI. There's absolutely no denying that fact. The writing was on the wall. Under the guise of the fact that the members did not, the general members did not agree to the recommendations was very extremely foolhardy. All the members should have realized the matter is vested in the hands of the Supreme Court, and Lodha committee recommendations were going to be accepted. There was no question of crossing the line as far as the Supreme Court is concerned and going beyond what Lodha committee had said. Enough opportunities were given by the Honorable Supreme Court in a very generous manner to the board to mend their ways, but they refused to do it, and these are the consequences. It's a very bad day for Indian administration, and this cricket control board, which has really grown with passage of time, has come into complete disrepute as far as the public at large is concerned. And they ought to have realized well in advance to implement these reforms.
Absolutely, but like Boria was mentioning, maybe the BCCI, and the state associations, everyone did not implement these recommendations was because most of the senior officials will be disqualified based on these recommendations. Who do you see now running the board? January 19th, an interim committee will be formed.
Well, I am not very sure as to whether the present BCCI President Anurag Thakur can again get re-elected or not. Because he has been removed, that's all right, but once the reforms have been accepted, obviously the eligible candidates would themselves be contesting the election. And one amongst them, as I see, could be Anurag Thakur himself. Because I don't think a ban has been imposed on him, and he is qualified, according to me, if he resigns as the President of Himachal Pradesh Cricket Association, and instead takes up the cricket control board, mental of the cricket control board. That could be one equation or one proposition. And I have absolutely no idea. In fact, I don't have the calculations available with me as to the members who are eligible, who are not eligible. But I guess most of the
Kishore, just stay with us. I will come back to you. Some more reactions are coming in. Let me quickly dip into that and I'll come back to you. Just stay with us.
You know, Shobhit, the point is Kishore Rungta was talking about Anurag Thakur seeking requalification. Doesn't happen because 9 years is over in the Himachal Pradesh Cricket Association. So clearly there is a cooling off period and he cannot come back to office in any case. So Anurag Thakur seeking requalification doesn't happen. ML Nehru, Vice President, above 70, out. Ganga Raju, Vice President, out. TC Matthew, out. If I go down the list of vice presidents, practically everybody is out. So who becomes the interim president is actually the biggest call as far as the BCCI is concerned now. Because the senior most vice president, Ganga Raju, doesn't qualify. And if you go down the list of vice presidents, practically none of them qualify.
Absolutely. India Today's consulting editor Rajdeep Sardesai joins us live as well. Rajdeep, landmark judgment. Did you expect BCCI President Anurag Thakur, Secretary Ajay Shirke to be shown the door?
I think it was inevitable. I think given what has been happening in recent days with this judgment, I think it was almost inevitable that Anurag Thakur and Mr. Shirke would be shown the door. The BCCI had been given enough indication to this effect by the Supreme Court, which had even suggested that Mr. Thakur was guilty of perjury. I think the BCCI should have seen the writing on the wall, and the Supreme Court now has the slightly onerous task of how do you actually create how do you frame an interim committee that will actually implement the Lodha committee recommendations. It's one thing to ask Mr. Thakur and Mr. Shirke to step down, but given the various onerous recommendations of the Lodha committee in terms of who can actually contest for a BCCI post in the future, the options are very limited. And therefore, the appointment of an interim committee and then the possibility of a fresh election under the BCCI under the new Lodha committee guidelines will not be an easy task.
Absolutely.
So I think we've only seen Act 1, Scene 1 at the moment. It's not going to be easy for the Supreme Court as well to, in a sense, run the BCCI almost by proxy.
Absolutely. I'd request all our guests to stay with us. We've got an exclusive reaction coming in from Justice Lodha. Let's listen in.
I have with me Justice R.M. Lodha. Sir, you had pointed out a number of impediments in implementing the recommendations. After the removal of Ajay Shirke and Anurag Thakur, you think the road is clear and Supreme Court has taken the right decision?
I hope so, because once the order of 18 July 2016 was passed and committee was given task to implement the order, we proceeded in that earnest. We fixed timelines, but when we found that there were a lot of obstructions and impediments, timelines were not being adhered to by the BCCI, we submitted status reports. As a matter of fact, we submitted 3 status reports, and after hearing them, today's order has come. Hopefully, this will help in implementation of the order passed by the Supreme Court on 18 July 2016.
And sir, you think BCCI, could have behaved or done all this in a more mature manner? Probably wouldn't have had to face the kind of situation they are in today.
One should understand that the order of the highest court has to be implemented. Nobody can disobey it. Nobody can just find escape route. So had they implemented the order of the Supreme Court, which accepted our reforms and our report, perhaps this day would not have come and there was no necessity of passing the order which the Supreme Court passed today. But unfortunately, BCCI refused to implement the order. So this is the first step by the Supreme Court in ensuring that its judgment of 18 July 2016 is implemented and no obstructions remain in implementation of that order.
Sir, probably a few gentlemen in the top at the BCCI, probably they could be the reason why BCCI is in the situation today. Especially Anurag Thakur, against whom perjury charges can also be initiated.
Look, that of course order has to be seen. I won't comment on that. I can only say that we submitted our report on 4 January 2016. BCCI had full say before the Supreme Court in objecting to our report. They criticized each and every aspect contained in our report. But ultimately on 18 July, after hearing, the Supreme Court largely accepted our report and gave us task to implement the order. So once the Supreme Court passed the order, it had to be implemented, and there was absolutely no escape.
And better days for BCCI ahead after the removal of Anurag Thakur, Ajay Shirke and the other people in the top brass, and because they have been claiming that Indian cricket will be thrown into a turmoil, but you think good governance will be the practice from here on?
Look, people come and people go. Our report focused on structural changes. We put in place a structure that would bring in transparency, accountability and good governance in the administration of cricket. And once our report is implemented, once the judgment of the Supreme Court is implemented, obviously it will bring in better governance in the game of cricket. And look, better, obviously, people come, people go. What is important is the implementation of the Supreme Court order, and it should be done as early as may be possible.
So one last question. You think this order will set the precedents for not only BCCI but other sports federations as well? How in sports is run in this country?
I would always wish that, because if our report is taken as a template for other sports organizations, federations, that would bring in transparency, accountability and good governance in these federations, and the monopoly which is going on for few people to control the administration for years and decades together would vanish.
Okay, all right, sir. Thank you very much for speaking to us. So that was Justice R.M. Lodha, a very satisfied man today after the Supreme Court ruling. With camera person Rakesh Kumar, this is Rahul Rawat in New Delhi for India Today.
Thank you.
Yes, let me go across to Rajdeep Sardesai, who's still live with us. Rajdeep, like Justice Lodha was saying, people will come, people will go, administrators will come and go. The game of cricket will benefit from this order. And of course, landmark order, like Boria was also mentioning, it will be difficult to form, to see who will lead the BCCI. Most of the senior officials do not fulfill any of these criteria. And moreover, the India-England series is also around the corner. So let's hope cricket on the field is not affected at all.
No, I don't think cricket on the field will be affected. I think the Supreme Court has made it amply clear, even while the India-England Test series was going on, that they would continue to support the BCCI in terms of organizing international cricket. One interesting and tantalizing prospect, of course, now is that Sourav Ganguly, the Bengal Cricket Association president, will he be the next board president? Because he clearly falls within the prescribed norms of the Lodha committee. He is not served for more than 3 years in a post, and therefore can perhaps become possibly a candidate for the next BCCI president, thereby making him the first former test cricketer who would be officially a BCCI president. So that's a tantalizing prospect, because otherwise an entire generation of BCCI office bearers is effectively disqualified by the Lodha committee recommendations. Mr. Ganguly is one of the few who does not fall within that disqualification norm, and therefore he could be a possible candidate. In the past, of course, in terms of the interim committee, the names of the former Home Secretary G.K. Pillai, former Test cricketer Mohinder Amarnath, and the former CAG Vinod Rai have been mentioned, but that would be an interim committee. Who will be the next board president and who will actually lead the board forward is the big question mark. And I would hesitate to suggest, or hasten to suggest, that Sourav Ganguly could be one name who would be as acceptable perhaps both to the old order and the new.
Absolutely. Boria, I wanted to come in. Boria, very quickly, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just mentioned Sourav Ganguly the other day. Shobhit, Rajdeep is right. Sourav is a front runner. Brijesh Patel qualifies. Amit Shah's son in Gujarat qualifies. But Sourav Ganguly, given his credibility and stature, does sort of become a front runner at this point in time. We've just done a calculation, and I spoke to 2 BCCI general managers and office bearers, and they are saying, quote unquote, they were expecting this. President and secretary were opaque. No decisions were discussed. All of these things were expected, and they are saying the game won't suffer. And 2 of these people will run the board as employees, because they are paid employees of the board and as professionals. So clearly there is a fissure now, and the professionals who are running the board are very clear that the game won't suffer. They were seeing the writing on the wall, and they are all gung-ho to run the board in a professional manner.
Right. I'd like to request all our guests and our reporter Rahul Rawat to stay with us. We will come back to discuss this landmark judgment by the Supreme Court, as the BCCI top brass has been shown the door. So what is the future of Indian cricket? We'll discuss after this break.